do want to get your thoughts on gold and the reset, but I want to keep it equity focused for now. And one of your correct calls is you had an Nvidia and Intel pairing. And we did see President Trump saying that, the U.S. government is now going to have a 10% stake in Intel. And that you had a reverse pair trade with Intel and Nvidia. Quickly talk us through that, because that seems to be coming through.
Well, that was actually the pair trade was something I just wrote about last week. The correct call that I made was that the Trump administration was going to take a stake in Intel. And that's what I made ahead of time. The pair trade was just an idea I had for last week, thinking like, hey, they're both semiconductors. Like, if you think that Intel now has the backing of SoftBank and the backing of the Trump administration, that, it may not be a terrible idea to go long Intel and short Nvidia to try to, see if the valuation, basically the price of sales is what I was looking at.
So let's talk.
And it boils down.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think you're going to say it boils down to potentially, the government taking stake in companies. And that's something that you've written about. I mean, you're talking about a weaker dollar. Some would say that that's by design, as the Trump administration is trying to onshore manufacturing, trying to reposition. COVID really highlighted how problematic and how fragile America's productive capacity has become when the supply chains froze and we realized how little we actually make here, from pharmaceuticals to semiconductors. It was a national security vulnerability, a threat, something that the Trump administration is looking at. Now we have the U.S. government taking a stake in MP Materials, a rare earth producer that's critical for defense. That stock surged, 313% year to date. Now, you've written saying that this is a signal, hence you had that Intel call, that the U.S. is moving towards an economy where strategic industries are pulled closer to Washington through subsidies, protections, buying stake in them. So I want to get your thoughts on if MP Materials was a signal, as you said. Talk us through that 75 critical companies list and that piece that you put together, because I thought that was very interesting in terms of a potential blueprint of what's coming, especially when you take it in the context of the Trump administration saying that we need to onshore manufacturing, saying that we need to be more independent. So talk us through that.
So ahead of the government taking stakes in MP Materials and Intel, I had written about both of those names to my Substack subscribers, because the Trump administration had come out and said, hey, we're going to hold rare earth minerals close to the vest. And there was USAR and there was MP. And I had laid out, those. And I think UU was the other one to my subscribers, said, hey, here's the names you might want to watch. And then obviously the Trump administration came out and said they were going to take the stake in MP Materials. And, it's up, I don't know, 200% or something this year. It was the same
MP,
deal with
313, I think.
Right. So it was the same thought process with Intel, which is, the government wants to keep production of, and this all kind of falls under the umbrella of we don't manufacture anything here anymore. And so I think part of Trump's broader plan with the tariffs and with trying to, rebalance trade, and you can talk about whether that's a fool's errand or not, but the idea behind it is that we don't make anything here in the US anymore. And COVID laid bare exactly what we don't make here, because you would walk into a Target and there would be nothing on the shelves. And people needed medicine and they couldn't get it because the pharmaceutical ingredients came from China. And so we learned a lot from that. I learned how truly dependent our economy is on, things from overseas. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue that like these insane tariffs on places like Vietnam are great ideas. But what I will advocate for is the idea that we do need to look at this for the first time ever. And it is a matter of national security, because, if we're not making everything that we need here to secure the country, then we're going to be at the behest of whoever's making it for us. So the idea behind the list that I produced, which was basically, look, the government's taken a stake in MP. I think that was around the time that they were discussing the stake in Intel. Here's 75 companies. So I think those two were on there. So here's 73 other companies that the government might want to keep close if this is what their playbook is going to be. People say like, oh, well, isn't that socialism? I'm not trying to argue whether or not the government should or should not be involved in these companies. this is what the Trump administration is doing. Like, I voted for Trump. I'd rather be concerned about this and try to be addressing it in some way possible than doing whatever the Biden administration was doing before that. Like, God only knows. But the idea was to take 73 additional companies in all these different sectors: healthcare, technology, obviously defense, aerospace, commodities, oil, and say, all right, here's 73 other names just to consider. And I'm not saying it's definitive or it isn't, that the Trump administration may want to keep close to the chest. So that was the idea behind that article.
And given that you were correct, give me 3 names that you think have the most asymmetric payoff out of that list of 75 if the Trump administration doubles down on this strategy.
I hate doing shit like this because this is, I'm going to look like a fool now when I get these wrong.
Or incredibly correct.
Right, that's true. Yeah. If I get these right, you must subscribe to my Substack. No.
Well, you got the first two right.
That's true. And by the way, also too, I want to just note that Zero Hedge also had written about both of those names in advance also. And so, and I'm not sure what the timing was on that, but I know that they all, it wasn't like I saw their picks and copied them, and I don't think they saw mine and copied mine, but they were also correct. They also said that. Another name that they talked about the other day is the LEU, which is a basically like a low enriched uranium processor in the US. So I would put that on the list because I think that the thought process is secure uranium supply for these new small modular reactors. You already have names like Oklo that are working with the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. They're very, very closely tethered to the government already. So for me, I'm long some LEU. I think if I had to take a wild ass guess, and again, none of this is financial advice. Obviously, I'm not an RIA. I mean, look at me. You know what I mean? Like, but this is not financial advice. I would just say, personally, I think LEU. I actually thought the other day as I was making that list that Johnson & Johnson was an interesting name too. They are like the quintessential U.S. like staple healthcare company based in New Brunswick, New Jersey. They've been around for like 150 years. That's another like stock that I love. It's super boring. It's been trading at 150 forever. It's, cash generative. It's got a low PE. I thought Johnson & Johnson was like an interesting kind of staple name. And then I don't know, maybe Boeing, but really you look at a name like Boeing and like Raytheon and Lockheed, and these are pretty much all like already wholly owned subsidiaries of the Department of Defense. Yeah. So I'm trying to recall off the top of my head, but really, I guess LEU and J&J were the first two that came to mind from that list. And then I would actually say maybe even like one of the miners. This is something I talked about on Palisades Gold Radio a bunch of times years ago, the idea of if we return to some type of gold standard, that the miners would eventually be nationalized. And, is there risk in the miners being nationalized? I said this years before MP materials, like we're talking about 5-6 years ago. So maybe even the miners, there might be some risk of nationalization. I don't know. Those are my 3 guesses.
Okay. Well, I mean, to your point, like a lot of these companies like Boeing that are in your list, Northrop, Lockheed, a lot of them live on government contracts anyway. So,
you know what? Here, I'll give you another one because it just came to mind. I think maybe one of the cybersecurity names. I think something like a CrowdStrike or Palo Alto Networks. I think that a lot of I think there's Cold War kind of already taking place technologically. We see how we responded to Russia invading Ukraine through, basically cutting them off from the SWIFT system. And I think that similarly, other nations, rather than, start a nuclear Armageddon, are going to be more inclined to take the front lines of the battle in cyberspace. And this was actually in 24 or 23, I wrote about cybersecurity names, and the IHAK was the ETF. Palo Alto Networks and CrowdStrike were names that I liked for the year. I think it was 2023. They've done exceptionally well since then. I think cybersecurity is going to continue to be a serious, at the margin theme. So my final answers are, if I had to guess, again, not financial advice, LEU, which is a low enriched uranium company, something in the cybersecurity world, Palo Alto, CrowdStrike, something cybersecurity related, and Johnson and Johnson. If I had to guess, those are my three names.
Okay. Thank you for putting yourself out there. And if you are correct, I promise you I will give you the due credit and props, and we'll be singing your praises.
It never works like that, though. It's never like you get two things right and then somebody asks you to it's like you bet the 1 o'clock football game, you win. You bet the 4 o'clock football game, you win. And you say, I'm unstoppable today. I'm putting it all on the 8 o'clock game, and you get torched in the first quarter. You're down 40 to nothing.
But let's talk a little bit about the broader implications here. I mean, firstly, do you think that this is drifting towards state capitalism, nationalization? I mean, what does this mean for a free market ideology that we stand for? Do you think that jeopardizes that in any way?
I don't think that Trump is a socialist. I'm not worried about it, to be honest with you. I think that he is strategically trying to realign the country. And I think what he's trying to do, whether it's getting the tents off the lawn at the White House or, stopping the millions of illegal immigrants crossing the border, or it's bringing production back to the U.S. And I wrote this about the tariffs. It was a heavy-handed approach. But to be honest with you, everything's going to feel like a heavy-handed approach when we haven't been doing shit about it for years. Okay. So when the accepted wisdom is it's okay for 3 million people to cross the border in a year or whatever it is. And then these people are allowed to come in and they're allowed to shoplift and loot and kill people. And that's fine. And we have DAs that won't put them. When that's the accepted wisdom, the idea of just shutting the border down and putting up a wall, which objectively by itself is not a stupid idea. It seems like, so why is he doing this? This is insane. It's like, yeah, maybe it wouldn't be necessary if the problem hadn't gotten so out of control to begin with. And it's the same with what's going on in Washington with, first off, Washington's a federal territory. He's allowed to bring in the National Guard if he wants. All hell is breaking loose. The last time I was in D.C., I was appalled. I couldn't believe what it looked like. I hand to God, this is 2 years ago. I got to the train station, there's fucking homeless people everywhere. Tents and this and that and the other. And I understand that this is it's a social problem. And it has to be dealt with social services, and it has to be dealt with humanely. And I get it. That's an argument. And another argument is this is the capital of the nation. And if there's anywhere in the country where optics matter, this is it. I traveled through Europe this summer and I went to a bunch of different countries' capitals. We were the only one with homeless people in tents on the front lawn of the capitals. Everybody else is Parliament building, the Elysee Palace, and being in Budapest and being, the Budapest Parliament building. All these other places are these great, sprawling, majestic bastions and wonderful, points of ambassadorship for their country. And ours is you go off a train station in DC and you got a bunch of people shooting up drugs in tents outside of it. So does it seem like a heavy-handed approach to do that? Yeah, it does. But really, we need it. We're overdue. And the tariffs were the same thing. Was the calculation for tariffs asinine that he came out and used this formula, which was I forget what it was, their tariffs versus us, plus or minus the trade deficit, whatever it was completely unscientific and completely insane. But and was it a heavy-handed approach? Yes, it is. But was it all terrible? No. Is it bringing in some revenue? Yes, it is. Did it put him in a power to negotiate a little bit with these countries? Yes, it has. Have some of these companies renegotiated deals? Yes, they have. Are the rest of them on notice? Yes, they are. We're still dealing with, India now or whatever. We're still dealing with China now. But they understand the posture that we've taken and the position that we've taken, which is the deal as it exists today is over. It's not working for us. Yes, they say you can't break an omelet. You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. In Trump's case, you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs and possibly setting fire to the whole fucking house, but they understand that there's work that needs to be done. So, it's a heavy-handed approach, but it needed to be done. Go to northeastern Pennsylvania, go to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where the steel plants used to be. Go to Detroit, Michigan, and ask these people, go back to near where my hometown was, where the Kimberly-Clark factory closed down. It just, we don't manufacture anything here anymore, and we're not being compensated for that properly, and the politicians haven't paid any mind to it. So it is a heavy-handed approach, but you can't turn around the Titanic by sticking a little oar in the water and just trying to paddle. Like, you got to go fucking full reverse engines and flip the wheel 6,000 degrees in the other direction or whatever it is. And then you got to wait for 20 years for the thing to do a 180-degree turn. And that's what we've done.
Well, look, I mean, I think that's the broader point. And I do want to get your thoughts. I know you're talking about the crime in Washington, D.C. I know you're joining us from New York City, and we've talked about what's happening at the capitalist capital of the world. We'll get to New York City, but let's talk about this turning the Titanic, right? I see you shaking your head. I want to get your thoughts on that and what we can expect from the mayoral election. But let's keep it broader picture for now and what we're seeing in the United States. So we have what you're saying, an attempt to turn around the Titanic, but can it be successful? How successful can it be? I mean, certainly we needed to rebalance these tariffs, and we're already seeing trade deals signed and countries pledging to invest trillions into the United States, and companies like, Apple, arguably the poster child for global supply chain, saying that they're now going to build factories in the U.S. And we've got Scott Bessent saying that the tariffs have already generated about $100 billion since April. He's saying we'll get $300 billion more in revenue in by the end of this year. But, given where we are, given the scale of the debt crisis, given how far we are in terms of offshoring manufacturing, can we turn this Titanic around? Can the Trump administration pull it off? Do they have enough time, given term limits? What is your sort of bigger outlook? Is this something that could become a bipartisan issue? Several questions in one there, but I have a feeling you're going to riff on all of that at once. So the big picture, can it be done?
It's not going to be a bipartisan issue. You have one party that's pro-crime, and you have one party that's anti-crime. You have one party that's for keeping police on the streets, and you have the other one with this imbecile who's just got elected in New York who wants to get rid of all misdemeanors.
Hasn't been elected yet. Is the Democratic
Correct.
Nominee. Hasn't been elected yet, but of course talking about Zoran Mamdani. But before we get on the crime, I'm talking about the Trump agenda to onshore manufacturing, to bring back American sovereignty, to try bringing tariffs, revenue and all of that. Do you think that can be successful? Can we turn around that Titanic, as you put it?
Well, the pros are, right, that he has Congress, and so he can try to get through as much as he can now. No, I think it would take 8 or 12 years at least, and so I think a lot of it will hinge on winning 2028 too. Hopefully, people understand that what he's doing is necessary. And they afford the Republican Party the ability to try to continue down that path. And, hopefully, I love J.D. Vance as a candidate. I think he's exceptionally intelligent. I think he's super sharp. I think he, absolutely crushed his debates heading into this election. I would love to see him as our next president. I think that he would probably do a good job kind of staying the course and staying down this path. But what will happen is, if the Democrats are elected in 2028, they will seek to immediately undo everything that the Republicans are doing now, similar to how Trump got into office and undid as much as he possibly could do from the Biden administration via executive order. And so, it's just a question on whose set of ideologies do you believe are, should be more of a priority?